For centuries, European physicians prescribed a substance made from crushed human remains. Kings, nobles, alchemists, and even scientists consumed this material believing it possessed properties capable of curing diseases, stopping bleeding, and even prolonging life. The most disturbing part of this story is that it did not happen in secret cults or occult rituals. It happened in pharmacies. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, human bodies began to be treated as medicinal raw material. Skulls were ground into powder to treat epilepsy. Human fat was used in ointments for wounds. Fresh blood from executed individuals was consumed as medicine. And entire Egyptian mummies were looted, crushed, and legally sold as pharmaceutical products. This strange substance was given a specific name, Mumia. Today, the idea of consuming human remains seems grotesque and unimaginable. But for hundreds of years, this practice was considered legitimate science by some of the most educated men in Europe. The history of medicine is filled with forgotten cures, strange experiments, and beliefs that challenge modern logic. Yet few are as disturbing as the period when human corpses were literally transformed into medicine. But after all, how did Europe come to believe that human bodies could cure disease? The story of the so-called Mumia begins long before medieval European medicine. The word originates from the Persian term macabre, used to describe a dark, bituminous substance naturally found in certain regions of the Middle East. This asphalt-like material had been used since antiquity in medicinal treatments and preservation processes. Ancient peoples believed it possessed healing properties, especially against wounds, infections, and hemorrhages. Over time, European physicians and merchants mistakenly began associating this substance with Egyptian mummies, since many mummified bodies displayed a dark coloration due to the oils, resins, and compounds used during embalming. That was when a dangerous interpretation emerged. People began to believe that the mummified bodies themselves carried medicinal properties. During the Middle Ages, and especially between the 16th and 17th centuries, human remains began to be commercially sold as medicine across various parts of Europe. Egyptian mummies were dismantled, crushed, and transformed into medicinal powder sold in apothecaries and pharmacies. The product was consumed by people from different social classes, including members of the European nobility. At the time, medicine was still heavily influenced by the ancient theory of the humours, developed in ancient Greece. According to this theory, the human body was governed by 4 primary fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Disease was believed to result from an imbalance among these elements. Within this logic, people believed that human substances carried part of the body's vital force. For this reason, human remains began to be used in medical treatments. Pulverized skulls were recommended for headaches and epilepsy. Human fat was used in ointments to treat inflammation and wounds. Fresh blood, especially from recently executed individuals, was even consumed in some regions of Europe as a way to restore vitality. Today, we know that these practices possessed no real scientific effectiveness. But for physicians of the time, they represented legitimate attempts to understand and combat disease in a world where epidemics, infections, and premature deaths were extremely common. Beyond medicine, there was also a strong influence from alchemy. During the Renaissance, many scholars believed the human body contained essences capable of transferring energy, strength, or vitality. The idea that human matter preserved some kind of therapeutic power helped expand the consumption of mumia even further. The problem was that European demand for human remains grew rapidly, and this would eventually create a macabre trade that crossed entire continents. As demand for mumia increased, Egyptian tombs began to be looted on a massive scale. For centuries, European merchants imported human remains from Egypt to supply apothecaries, physicians, and medicinal markets. Mummified bodies were dismantled, crushed, and sold in small quantities as official medicine. But there was a problem. Demand became so high that in many cases, there were no longer enough mummies to satisfy the European market. That was when the counterfeits began. Historical accounts indicate that some merchants started using more recent corpses to produce fake mumia. bodies of criminals, poor individuals, and even victims of epidemics were artificially treated to imitate ancient mummies before being sold as medicine. In other words, parts of the human body had become pharmaceutical products. The most astonishing part is that this practice was not considered secret or illegal in many places. On the contrary, it existed within the boundaries of medicine accepted by European society at the time. Several influential physicians defended the medicinal use of human substances. Some medical recipes explicitly recommended the consumption of powdered human skull or preparations made with body fat. Even members of royalty used these types of treatments. King Charles II, during the 17th century, consumed a preparation known as the King's Drops, produced from crushed human skulls mixed with alcohol. The medicinal use of the human body reached the point where public executions became places for collecting fresh blood. In some regions of Europe, people believed that drinking blood while it was still warm could cure diseases such as epilepsy. Today, all of this seems to belong to the realm of horror. But for centuries, these practices existed within what was considered rational medicine for the time. And perhaps this reveals something even more unsettling about human history. The line between science, desperation, and superstition has not always been as clear as we imagine. From the 18th century onward, the gradual advancement of science began weakening these practices. The development of modern anatomy, chemistry, and scientific methods started demanding more concrete evidence regarding the effectiveness of medical treatments. Little by little, substances produced from human remains began losing their place within European medicine. In addition, philosophical and ethical changes profoundly altered the way the human body came to be viewed. The idea of transforming corpses into medicine began generating moral discomfort and increasing criticism. Even so, some of these practices survived surprisingly long. The medicinal use of powdered human skull, for example, continued appearing in European pharmaceutical records until the 18th century. Certain preparations derived from human fat remained circulating in folk medicine for decades. Only with the strengthening of modern medicine and microbiology were these practices almost completely abandoned. Today, the story of Mumia tends to cause shock because it challenges our modern understanding of science and rationality. But it also serves as a reminder of something important. What a society considers legitimate knowledge can change drastically over time. Many medical practices of the past were born from fear, desperate attempts to survive, and the scientific limitations of each era. And perhaps that is exactly what makes this story so fascinating. Because for centuries, some of the most educated men in Europe truly believed that corpses could heal the living. Had you ever heard this story before? Leave a comment below.